Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. We have no candidate. Everybody else is here. Now is the time for the open forum. So if there's anybody who'd like to speak to the council, address the council, come on up. All of you can come up, or just one of you, and you should address us, or like just tell us who you are, and then go for it.
Okay, I'm Marais. I am the editor and publisher of Boreal Core. It's a youth digital media group, and we consider ourselves story scouts. We do a lot of different kinds of writing, and one of it is entrepreneurial writing. And we have a client, which is the American Lung Association. So this summer we're emphasizing lung health. And we have stations on Wednesdays and Thursdays on the library lawn where we tell people about lung health. And here's our mobile slideshow to summarize it, because what we're most interested in is an initiative that's going around the state called Tobacco 21, which changes the age of buying tobacco products to 21 to keep them out of the schools and away from little kids. So take it away, slideshow.
Okay, so we're Boreal Core. This is our Summer of Long Plan Words of Summer of Love. And we, like Ann said, we just write stories, and recently we partnered with the Lung Association, and we're advocating laws like Tobacco 21 and tobacco-free and vape-free environments and communities. And yeah.
And so like Tobacco 21, as Ann was saying, it's a law that we would like to have put in place where it changes the age that you can buy tobacco from 18 to 21.
So, like also Ann was saying, every Wednesday and Thursday we meet on the library lawn and we do art projects and a bunch of different stuff about Tobacco 21. And to help bypassers that come by to our picnic table or just come sit with us and do art projects about how Tobacco 21 and tobacco and smoking and vaping is bad for you.
And we create multimedia art projects where we draw a picture of a lung and kind of split it in half. So one side is what your lung looks like after you smoke or chew tobacco or inhale any of those chemicals. And then one side is the healthy lung that we put up with jewels on with glue and talk about that it's a happy and healthy lung that doesn't have to endure the effects that smoking and tobacco products have on you.
Our goal is to protect like the community health and like especially children, because like younger kids are like more targeted for these things like to happen, to buy the vapes and stuff.
So when we go, like if we're traveling or if we're at different gas stations, let's say in the cities or Duluth or something like that, we will take pictures of different vaping products, and then we have like a bunch of those pictures from our whole writing group, which isn't all here, and yeah.
And there are so many different flavors of these products, from everything from strawberry to dragon blood to attract younger and older people. And they all have nicotine and horrible products in it. And we, if you would allow us, we'd like to give you a smell test to compare the candy products and the vape products, because the flavors are very similar, because the tobacco companies are intentionally making it seem for kids that vaping is happy and healthy, and but they put it next to candy in a lot of stores. So, we went to the cities, and there were vaping products right next to Little Duddies.
Wow.
So, we want to compare that and see what you guys think about the flavors, if that is
If you
okay.
guys can tell the difference between the e-cigarettes and the candy.
Yeah. Just send it around.
Okay.
Shut your eyes.
Well, we can see it.
Oh yes.
We'll have to use our imaginations. Except Anna
Yeah.
doesn't
You
have.
guys have to close your eyes, and we go around and put it under your nose so you can smell
Oh,
it. And yes,
I
to
see what
see
you're
if
saying.
it's-
Oh boy.
Take one again.
Interactive.
Well,
Yes.
you stick it right straight. Don't do it. Don't do it.
I think Jay
can shoot.
volunteered to be the only subject.
Jay did?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
Looks like
well,
he's ready.
that has to happen, then that has to happen.
So, who wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go first.
Okay.
This is your handout. Okay, you want me to close my eyes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can't say this has ever happened at a city council meeting before.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one.
Yeah, is that candy or vape?
I don't know. Take me the other one. I gotta have something to
No,
compare it
You
to.
have to,
Oh my
guess.
Well, it wasn't super strong smelling, so I would assume that would be the vape product.
No, it's candy.
That was candy?
Okay. And
Mhm.
now, here's another product
Tell me what I'm supposed to smell.
right now.
That one smells a little bit, doesn't smell quite as sweet. So, and then plus I'm assuming since the previous one was candy, that one would be the vape product.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll go next. Okay. Who wants to go next? You look like you want to go next.
Oh!
Go ahead.
She's very convincing. That's good.
So you can smell it out.
That is tobacco.
That's the vapor. Yeah.
You're better at this than I am.
I'm not a smoker. I'm not around it anymore at all.
And then I'll do another one. Hold on, wait.
Do you all know what a jewel looks like? It's been in the news. We have one here.
A what?
The jewel that looks like a flash drive that drives teachers crazy because kids put it into their laptop.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
is a jewel. This is what you smoke out
Or
of
this.
So you can smell it now.
And you can take this out and it looks like a flash
Coffees.
drive
I
and you
would
put it
say
in your
that's like
computer
candy
and
type.
then in
Yeah.
class people put it on
And
and
they
then
suck it, and then they like put the smoke down their shirt
So
or up their sleeve.
It's driving people. Teachers are writing all over the world about jewels that are out of
So
control.
does that thing just like warm up? Like it's
Well, you plug it into your computer, so
then
when
it
you
charges
there's
or
a there, and
something?
it charges it, and then you put your mouth around it and like blow, like you do a cigarette, and then you blow out, and then you blow into your shirt.
put it in your shirt so like no one can see it. Your teachers and stuff.
wow.
Yeah.
That seems really
Someone else want to go next?
I'll go.
good sports. Good sports.
Yeah.
You can smell it.
Library user.
Candy.
No, that was me.
Ah.
See, Anton and I just don't eat any candies, so we just don't know.
Strict candy.
Yeah. Strict.
Up for a challenge. Ooh,
Yeah.
Jonathan wants to do it too. Just
Yeah, you better
on
give
and
Jonathan a
off.
chance here, just so everybody gets a
Who else
chance.
wants to do it?
John.
He needs to get a chance.
Okay. So,
Eyes are closed.
He's cheating. I totally.
no, Sammy, that's the wrong part. That's the charger, Sammy.
No, it smells like
Candy doesn't have chargers.
Yeah.
The engineer figured it out.
Huh.
Just totally give it away.
That's candy.
Yeah. And then, yeah.
Good job.
Not candy, we know. Right.
So you guys have been down to the state legislature to talk about this as well.
Yes, along with many other groups of kids who also feel strongly about this subject. And we talked to our Representative Eklund and State Senator Bach.
Yeah.
And talked about like if the opportunity came along, would he vote for a tobacco 21?
Yeah.
And he said, I am unsure, because he said it would probably not reach him, so.
Yeah, that's gonna be an interesting walk or line to walk on that one, just to see how they would take it up, because it's that's a state level thing. You know, in the city we make decisions about local tobacco licenses, but we don't make decisions about what the actual age is or any of that sort of thing. So I would love to encourage you to keep working on this and to keep talking to state legislators and talking to other people around the state as well, because a lot of those, when it comes down to how a democracy works, those legislators, they act based on what their constituents say. And so that would be the biggest encouragement I could give you, is just to keep doing it, because the work that you're doing on the lawn is going to be probably the best thing you can do to get the word out to people, so that people know there's a movement about this. And now you've talked to us, and so we can be voices for it as well, and see what we can do when we talk to other people as well. So
Okay, thank
yeah,
you.
thank you.
Thanks for all your
Thank
words.
you.
Thank you.
Anybody else for the open forum? Anybody else? Nobody? Okay, so we'll close the open forum. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. So on the consent agenda, we have the typical three things, and then we have a temporary liquor license for North House Unplugged. I looked through this one as well, and it looks like it is pretty much identical to what they were planning on, or what they did for last year, which is part why it's part of the consent agenda. So unless someone would like to pull that and discuss something in the consent agenda, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
So,
Oh, there's a movement. Is there a second?
oh, second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. All right, so you guys are up. Insurance renewal. So we've got a couple of significant changes. You should probably introduce yourselves for the viewing audience, and then we can jump into questions about the insurance, or if you just want to jump into some changes that have been made, then we can go.
All right. I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for getting us on the agenda and giving us an opportunity to speak with you tonight. I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Bob Cummings. I'm the manager at Security State Insurance. This is my colleague, Ben Peters, and you probably know Ben from around town. He's working in our agency here in town. As you are probably aware, Paul Coe was your previous agent, met with the council every year, and he's retired, officially retired. He retired last summer. And he did work on the renewal with Kim last summer. They got the renewal going, and now we're in a position to work with you on that. I just want to say that our agency does represent several cities. I think we have five cities that we work with. So we have extensive experience with the League of Minnesota Cities, work with them closely, are familiar with their products and what they have available to you. I did look over your renewal, and I think Kim is working with Beth in our office, who is going to help with the applications and get the applications submitted. The issue with the new Public Works building did come up, and we have a binder on that. We got coverage bound, so if something happens, we have coverage in place. The league has asked us to do a replacement cost estimate on the building. We're going to try to do that. We did get a list of the costs and the expenses involved with building that building, and with some of the expenses being site preparation and earth movement and that kind of stuff, it probably isn't going to be as high as what that total is. But we're going to work with them. They will eventually come out and probably do an inspection, and they have been going out and hiring a company to do appraisals on a lot of the city properties, which is nice. I don't know when the last time it was done here, but they will come out and do an appraisal on all the properties, and they just kind of do that for us. It's a nice service to get those property values up, because I don't know much about sewer, water, and water systems. They're the experts at that. Anyway, but we'll continue to work with you to get that renewal application completed. I just want to say that the package that the city does have with the league is a very comprehensive package. It provides a lot of all the property coverages, the liability coverage, very comprehensive liability from your general liability, your public liability, your auto. There's a bond that protects the city officials, the clerk and the finance director and the administrator, anyone that handles money, the fire department. Does the fire department have a relief association? Okay, so the handlers or the people involved, if officers of the relief association are covered under that bond, do we know if they have any charitable gambling? Do they have charitable gambling?
Not the fire department.
No? Is anyone else in the city involved in charitable gambling?
The Sons of the American Legion do.
But not me.
Not, no, okay. So But I just want to say that the fidelity and fiduciary bonds it's covered in that bond. I think it's $300,000 bond that's provided by the league's policy. So, every year we talk, we like to talk about the changes, and there haven't been a lot of changes. One thing I wanted to bring up were the rate, kind of the rate changes. Liability rates actually went down a little bit per household with the league, so you're going to see a small decrease in your liability premiums. The bond rates went down, liquor liability rates went down, and all the other coverages are kind of flat. So you're not going to see any huge bumps in rates. You may see a bump in your premium because we're going to be adding like a $4 million property, but no big bumps in rates.
Do you
So-
have any idea what the increase, what like ballpark that increase would be? I suppose you probably don't know. until you
Yeah,
get the
I
assessment.
do. I mean, I think your rate is about a 9-cent rate. So if we got $4 million, 9 cents per hundred. Does anyone have a calculator? $4 million.
$26,000.
26,000.
36,000.
3,600 probably.
3,600.
3,600. That seems more like
Extra zero.
you're probably looking at about a $3,600 rate increase in your property rates.
Okay.
Some of the other things that changes, they've added, they've provided cyber security coverage in your package. So if someone breaches your system and picks up your taxpayer IDs and your social security numbers, this kind of stuff, you've got coverage for that up to $3 million. What they're doing with this endorsement on your policy is extending that liability to other ways of cyber terrorism or cyber breaches, and that could be maybe in your water system or your sewer system. They could hack your electrical system. So they're extending it out up to $3 million of coverage for any cyber security breach in some of your public works systems. That was one thing I wanted to bring up. Also, another thing that they've added to your policy is a power surge coverage for your property.
Just for the city properties.
For the city properties. Well, you have coverage for like a natural lightning bolt that surges power and burns something up. You know, you have coverage for that. You hadn't had coverage for an artificial surge, which would be a down power line or someone hitting a power line, two lines touching together, or a tree falling on a power line, which causes a surge. They've added, typically that surge is covered under what they call equipment breakdown coverage. It's just kind of a general mechanical breakdown coverage on your equipment. Those cities that haven't chose that option for equipment breakdown would have up to $25,000, kind of a nominal amount per incident for an artificial surge. It's been an issue, and it's come up, and they've had claims, and they've added up to $25,000.
So that means the total is about 50,000 for that then? Like if I'm hearing you right?
No, just
Just
25,000.
25,000. So they've added that to the general policy.
They add that to the general policy. It's kind of a token amount. In dealing with other cities and doing a little bit of research, most cities have what they call equipment breakdown coverage. And it's designed for a mechanical breakdown of your utility systems, whether it be an electrical transformer or whatever they use for distributing electricity, pumps in the sewer system, lift station pumps, these kinds of things. And it's something that we may want to explore as an optional coverage.
So you're saying that we don't have that?
We don't have it. And it's a little bit, we've seen claims in that area where like a lift station pump, they're expensive. I think we have a couple that are $75,000, $80,000, listed in the property form. They just break down or burn up, or there's an electrical panel that burns up, or something that causes that thing to mechanically break down. And in your typical property insurance policy, mechanical breakdown is not a covered peril. With that equipment breakdown coverage, you pick up the coverage to repair or replace that equipment, and even in excess to 150% if you have to bring in on a emergency basis someone from out of town to come and repair it on an emergency basis. You'd hate to have a pump system, lift station pump or something break down in the middle of winter and not be able to move the sewer or water or whatever you're doing with it. So something like that, and I don't know if you want me to bring that up. We have a number of recommendations. I don't know if you wanted me to bring it up now or in a different setting, or what would be your process for recommendations on the policy.
Well, I think that we would have to discuss, the council would have to discuss whether or not that's something that we would like to explore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at this point, we probably just need to keep going through what the
Okay.
policy is at
Yep.
present.
I could bring it up to Mike or Kim, and then you could bring it up to the council, and if you'd like me to come back and I could, give you a little more description of some of these coverages or some of the recommendations, and then you guys could decide or whatever.
I think that
But-
sounds suitable.
Okay. One of the coverage issues that comes up every year is this liability waiver. And we'll probably need to address that sooner than later, because it's, before they issue the policy, they're gonna want that waiver signed. And the city of Grand Marais has waived the tort liability limits. And I just want to make sure everyone understands what we're doing when we're waiving that limit, and some of the consequences of that. The state statute kind of protects municipalities from tort liability, and they set a limit on how much a claimant can sue or a person can sue the city for. They're kind of protected by that law. And the structure of the liability on your policy is designed around that tort law, limit. When you waive that limit, basically you're saying we're not going to restrict anyone to that tort liability limit of $500,000. So you're opening yourself up or them up to maybe suing for more and getting more. So with that waiver signed, or waiving those limits, you're opening it up for more than $500,000 limit.
In your insurance, you don't have coverage for that.
Well, you have coverage up to a 500 or up to $2 million. Okay, but the part of the statutory limit is a max of 1.5 million. So if there is an occurrence, say a catastrophic occurrence where more than one,
Multiple people.
yeah. So, I mean, just for example, there was a terrible car accident on the busy street, right? And some people, bystanders, got hurt. There were several people injured, seriously injured, maybe killed. Your tort limit, the limit is 1.5 million. When you remove that or waive that limit, there's no limit. There could be a catastrophic loss, and the city could be exposed to more than that. So that's just what I want to recommend. Normally, if a city is going to waive, they usually buy excess liability coverage to cover some of those catastrophic losses. So,
And in the past, we have waived it and not purchased more excess
yeah.
liability coverage, because that keeps the premiums down.
Yep, yep. It's expensive to buy the excess liability. I think I got an estimate of $7,000 for an excess $1 million of liability for your city's liability insurance. So
And for the new members on the council, when we talked about this in the past, the discussion was, you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who are here, the discussion was that the city's exposure to these types of incidents is relatively small, and that putting down the additional money for that additional coverage still wouldn't limit how much we could be sued for. So the impact of that commitment of money was seen to be pretty low. So that's what I remember.
The actual waiver part, I think it costs you more to waive
Yeah.
the limit. So you pay
Yeah, it
extra
does.
money to waive the limit. Discussions in the past, and I think the council's waived the limit every year I've been here, is about the protecting the public that might be injured in some or harmed in some sort of situation more than protecting the organization. So if some of our citizens were impacted by something that happened, we don't want to necessarily hold them to a $500,000.
Yeah, the reason why,
It's really, obviously it's a complicated sort
Does
of
it only affect
question.
our citizens, or does it
No,
affect our visitors?
It affects anybody.
Anybody who would be injured on
yeah.
city street?
Yeah.
Well, and it's not just about injury. The city is likely to be involved in all kinds of different situations, whether we had any actual role in it or not, just because we're here. So.
The reason why it's more expensive, because instead of having a $500,000 per occurrence limit, you're exposed to $1 million, you know, or $2 million, excuse me. You have a $2 million limit per occurrence. So there's potentially one person or one occurrence that could bring $2 million instead of $500,000. So that's the difference. But it's a city council decision, and I just want to make sure everyone knows the difference and the reasoning behind some of the coverages associated with that.
So now, just my understanding in the past has been that we're still limited to the amount of coverage that we buy, that it's not possible for someone to sue us and recover more damages than, that we're only waiving it to the extent that we've purchased coverage. So it's not that we've got an uncovered potential liability out there if we waive it. It's just that we've increased it from $500,000 to $2 million.
No, I think you have, I don't think your exposure is limited to your policy limits. I think your exposure could be whatever it is.
I mean, right here, this says, if the member waives the statutory tort limits, and then under this option, the tort cap limits are waived to the extent of the member's liability coverage limits.
Mm-hmm.
So the total all claimants would be able to recover for a single occurrence would be limited to $2 million regardless.
Yeah, that's all they're going to pay, is that $2 million. But if the city was sued for $3 million, doesn't mean that you're not going to be subject to that additional money. Subject to that additional payment. You know, I don't know. It's probably not likely, but if there was a terrible accident or something, I don't think you're going to be limited. The insurance company is going to pay up to $2 million.
That's a different explanation than we've received in the past. So.
Yeah, but doesn't mean that the city isn't going to be sued for $3 million or $4 million. I don't know. You know.
But it doesn't mean that we end up paying $3 million or $4 million either if we're
No.
sued.
No,
So-
it doesn't. Doesn't mean that you're going to pay. I guess it depends on how extremely negligent you are. You know, I don't know I don't know where the limits are there. You know.
So it's more expensive to waive the tort, and then it also exposes us. But the initial thinking, you're saying, going back to when, as long as you've been here, Mike, I don't know, it must be the same with you, Kim, that that's been waived in the past simply because if there was an incident, the feeling would be that if somebody felt it was worth more than $500,000, which is the limit of the tort, that money should be available. I mean, that's a weird way of saying it, but that
So it was more about not wanting to unfairly punish a member of the public that was potentially harmed by something that we're liable for.
In a case of negligence where we would be on
Yeah.
the ropes.
But, you know, we've not made a staff recommendation on this ever, so it's just been, I think at this point, it's probably just momentum that continues to.
What's the difference in the premium if you don't waive the tort, you know?
You know, I don't know right offhand. I could
I don't
find
think it
out.
was even $1,000 the last time we
No.
asked, so.
Okay.
No, you're just basically buying more coverage, you know,
Yeah.
from 500 to 2 million, basically, on that per occurrence.
Okay.
So it's probably not too much. Anyway, I don't know, that's up to you, and I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the differences and the options.
So that's a decision that we need to make as a council. We need to say whether or not we want to waive that or not. Like Mike said, and now I'm remembering better those conversations. The money difference between waiving and not waiving was not super significant, and also in the past, I believe the council said that they felt it was important to respect the true cost of an incident that the city had responsibility for, and that's why we were willing to pay a little bit more for the liability coverage to cover that if we waive this. So that's what we've done in the past. I don't know if anybody has a strong feeling about that. We don't need to make a motion about that right now. We can certainly wait till the end, but we're eventually going to have to make that decision. So,
Okay. Anyway, here's a form. Do you have
something else?
Generally, we do make it at this meeting.
Well, I mean, like at the end of the conversation about insurance.
Okay.
So, I mean, we could make that decision right now if anybody has a strong feeling about it, or else we can wait till the end. But we will eventually have to make that decision.
Yeah.
I mean, for the sake of Chris, I mean, is there any, I don't know, is there anything that you would weigh in on with the tort limit waiver?
I don't know if you heard you.
He's probably watching at home, so just wait 30 seconds.
Is Chris the city attorney?
Yeah.
Okay.
He looks like a telephone.
So, Chris, they're wondering if you have a recommendation on waiving or not waiving the statutory tort limits.
I mean, generally speaking, if you're not going to buy the excess liability coverage, I would not recommend waiving the statutory tort limits. I mean, I think just from a legal perspective, most cities do not waive the statutory tort limits. And I guess there's, obviously the legislature at some point decided that this would be something to put in place and would be good to have to try to govern the liability of cities for various torts. So, at the end of the day, I guess my perspective would be if you're not going to buy the excess liability coverage, that you probably shouldn't waive the tort limits.
Okay.
I think, I don't know, maybe Chris has a better explanation of this, but I think being the municipalities and providing the public services, there's a lot of exposure out there that you don't have a lot of control over. You got lots of property that you have and people using your property and just a lot of exposure, and you're not making money off it. It's not a money-making proposition. You're providing a service, and that's why I believe that was the essence of the legislation regarding the tort limits.
What does anybody else think about that?
Feeling kind of torn.
Well, part of it is if we, like Chris says, if we don't waive them. So this is saying if we do not waive them, their max then is up to 500,000, but they could obviously sue for more. One of the things I think has to happen is, safety-wise, we have to instruct our employees to be diligent in what they're doing and to make sure that things you know, I can think about, we've talked about a particular property right now that we all have concerns over, and I know we'll hear more about that coming down, but I think that we have a expectation of our employees to ensure things are done safely and with public safety in mind, that if we get to this point, and somebody comes after us, we might have to take our lumps. But how far out do we plan for that? How much do we pay for that? That's a crapshoot. So I don't know if we go up to the 2 million. I don't know, you know, does it sit down and maybe we need to see some numbers as far as cost. What are we looking at if we purchase additional stuff? I guess I'd be curious in that to move from 500,000 to excess. What really is the difference if we're talking?
I did get a price on $1 million excess liability, and that would be in excess of your auto. I mean, it's your public liability. It was a little over $7,000 to buy that $1 million excess.
And that moves us from the 500,000 up to the
It
million?
moves you from 2 million to 3 million.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because we would waive.
Yeah.
But 500,000
Okay.
to 2 million is a negligible difference.
Yes, it is. It is.
And it costs us more to waive the limit. So if we keep the limit at 500,000, we're saying that no one is allowed to win more than $500,000 per occurrence in a lawsuit against us. So that is the extent of our coverage, and that's all we would need.
Mhm.
And there are some other coverages that are not limited. There are other liabilities that are not tort liability that aren't limited, like ADA a claim or something like that. You know that you aren't limited to that. So not all claims are going to fall under that tort liability.
In the past, did we have excess liability coverage?
I mean, our coverage is not just 500,000 either.
We're covered up to 2 million.
Yeah.
The 2 million. 2 million per occurrence, 2 million aggregate.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that, I think that felt, in the past, that felt like a safe number because we didn't anticipate that we would be getting sued for multiple occurrences in one calendar year. That would result in more than $2 million worth of claims. Of course, that might be naive. So that's what we always stuck with. So it seems like, you know, what we've always done is we've always waived it. And so that would be the easy thing to do. It's a more expensive way to do. It's also, you know, gives people an opportunity to win back more than, like a more full amount of compensation if there's an instance of city malpractice or malfeasance or something like that. And but you know, the $500,000, that's a statute. That's a statute in the you know, in the Minnesota statutes. So there's a reason why that's there too. So.
And we have waived it in the past, since you've been here, Mike, is what you're saying?
Yeah, but I think it's been on autopilot for a while. And it's
Okay.
the first time there's been a kind of thorough conversation about it in 5 or 6 years. So.
Well, I'd make so we can move on here. I mean, I'd make a motion that we approve this, like, with the exception of not declining the tort limit.
So
Wait.
that's
Does not waive.
Does not waive.
does not
That's
waive,
what I'm looking for.
Does not waive tort.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that limits the amount that people can sue the city for to $500,000.
Yep.
That requires us to carry that amount, $150,000 per incident, $50,000 per claim.
500.
500.
That's what I mean, 500. Yeah, extra zero.
Extra zero.
Um, yeah. So that's a motion. Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so there's a second. Because if there wasn't a second, then we pretty much know what the next motion would have to be. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Does anybody have any feelings, negatively or otherwise?
think I'm tired. I feel like I'm backwards on all of this right now, so my mind's not thinking. I'm sorry. No.
I do see that the value that a group can, or that a claimant could get from the city, if the city really was liable for whatever that claim was. I could totally understand how that'd be more than $500,000. However, I do feel that the chance that we'll be called on to actually use this part of our policy during a calendar year, although a very real possibility, I think is something that that, like Kelly said, we can minimize that risk by informing all of our practices and following all of the safety rules that are already in place. You know, Kim's a safety officer; she goes through this stuff all the time with people.
Could I say something? A lot of your exposures in your vehicles, the driving, you know.
That's the thing, that's the number, that's where I keep coming back.
And that's probably an area that you can control, you know, too, you know, through MVRs, checking MVRs, and having driving safety training and these kind of things. So something that you can certainly control, and if you want us to help you with some of that stuff, the league has tons of stuff on safety. So I'd be more than happy to meet with your different department heads and go over some driver safety or any type of safety training at all.
I think
It's
that'd be a
important to
really-
have insurance, but let's not think that we don't have a robust safety program
Oh,
already.
yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
In the organization,
I
we
get
have
that.
a very good safety record of long standing, so, I mean, that, if you're concerned about that, we have a safety committee that we have a council member that's a part of and participate in that and see how it goes and what sort of things that they do. I mean, it's still important to have this type of coverage, but we haven't needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The league is an excellent resource when it comes to loss prevention and safety training. So we're there to help you out.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? A motion is to not waive the tort limit liabilities for the city. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries. So continuing in the policy, there's a number of things that are highlighted that you highlighted, or that somebody highlighted. And I'm wondering, do we need to go through and discuss those things, like the liability rating survey? It seems like we.
I think most of those highlights were questions for staff
Yeah.
more than questions for council.
Okay.
One more thing that as long as we're on the subject, we're covering this pretty thoroughly, is the deductible, and I noticed that your deductible is $10,000. That's $10,000 on the property, $10,000 on the auto, $10,000 on the equipment, everything. Okay, you do have a pretty substantial savings by going from a $250 deductible, which some cities have, all the way up to $10,000. I believe it's about $3,000 a year on the property rates. Okay. The downfall of having a $10,000 deductible is you got to have a backup plan if you need to use it, and a lot of cities just don't have that extra money in a budget or whatever. So if you do, that's great. One thing with the vehicles, I noticed that a lot of the vehicles are older, 10 years or older. Probably half of them may not even be worth $10,000. So I think we need to look at the vehicle list and decide, are these vehicles worth $10,000, or do we want to just have liability only on them? Because we're going to commit to the first $10,000 anyway. So just want to give you a heads up on that and let you know that we do have a high deductible. So you're going to be participating in a lot of claims if we do have claims.
Sure.
Okay.
Well, I saw that in the list of all the vehicles that the city has, from what I'm getting, there's only 2 of them that have coverage for replacement value.
Yeah.
The rest of them just have physical damage coverage.
Yeah.
And some of them don't even have coverage because they're trailers and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that, what does the physical damage coverage cover? So that's just physical damage to the vehicle itself?
Yeah, towards the vehicle itself, it'd be comp and collision. Kind of a typical, you collide with something that's going to cover the vehicle, if someone steals it, burns up, hail, windshields, all that. is physical damage. So if we've got a $10,000 deductible, obviously your windshields aren't going to be covered, but, I guess I would just stress the importance of looking at the values and making sure that our values are consistent with what our policies
And
are.
so what's the other option for that then?
Just remove the physical damage altogether and just have liability only. So you're not covering the vehicle at all. You're just covering the liability.
I think the
Yeah.
other option is we could have a lower deductible,
Yeah.
but we haven't needed one, and, we do have that deductible set aside every year,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it's a nice savings. It's a nice way to go. You're paying yourself instead of the insurance company, as long as you don't need to use it, and you've got a safety net there. That's good.
Yeah.
Good deal.
I guess I don't feel a lot of anxiety about that.
No.
About
So
the
is there
$10,000
savings?
deductible.
If you just go down to liability coverage, though, does that reduce it even further?
Yeah, it could. It kind of makes sense, especially if your vehicles are at 10,000 or less. You're not going to get much for that vehicle anyway if it burns up or someone steals it or something like that. So, yeah, I think you'd probably save maybe $1,000 by eliminating. Your premiums aren't real high on the physical damage, but you can maybe save $1,000 by eliminating those values. So.
I guess I don't feel like we really need to take an action on that unless somebody feels strongly.
I think that's a great thing for us to look at in
Okay.
depth.
Yeah. Just meeting, annually, just to update the values is a good idea. We've got an Elgin, the league provides up to $100,000 automatically on their policy for mobile equipment. So your loaders, your skid steers, anything running around your fire department equipment, on the trucks and all that, anything that leaves the premise is mobile equipment. So $100,000 is a nice blanket limit for that. So we have to schedule anything over $100,000. We've got this 2007, I think, Elgin sweeper at $119,000. So, I don't know what the value of that is, but that could be adjusted too, or we could take it off if it's under that $100,000 limit.
I'm sure we would pay that for it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
so.
So they're going to pay us what it's worth, and these are just things that had come up when I was reviewing the policy.
Does anybody else have any other questions about the policy itself? I guess I had one question about the building under construction and about getting all of that priced out. And so is there a policy right now, like the policy that we're talking about right now, does it include the value of the public works facility? Or is that, because you said that you still have to get people up here, assessors and appraisers up here to actually figure out how you're going to deal with it?
No, I think eventually they will, but no, they're asking me to do a replacement cost assessment, and we just basically use square footage and quality of construction, type of construction, and we have our own commercial replacement cost estimating forms,
And so that's the binder that we've got is based on that.
What we did is we sent the expenses into the league, and we asked them to bind that $4.7 million, just to bind it, so we got coverage in case something happens. What we're going to do now is do a little more thorough valuation on it. We're going to probably eliminate some of the groundwork, the demolition, some of the things that wouldn't be included. But yeah, we're probably still looking at about $4 million, and at that time they will add it on to the schedule. Okay, they'll add it onto the schedule and charge a premium. We don't have the renewal premiums yet for 8/1. We don't know what that premium is. We're working on the application. We'll have the application in, but coverages are bound. We'll get a binder and get everything bound as is. But we'll probably get some pricing and those valuations determined in the next week or so here, and get those numbers to you.
So we should expect, we should expect when all that all that information comes in, that we're going to see a change in the premium.
Yeah. Yes.
Makes sense.
Yep.
The city, the league does provide automatic coverage for buildings under construction, so there are some automatic limits included in the policy. But yeah, you're going to see some definite increase, and I think we figure about $3,000, $3,600 or whatever.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions about the insurance policy for these guys?
I got one last thing. There's a resolution. The league has still got Paul Coe as the agent of record,
Okay.
and they had asked us to have the city sign a resolution. And basically, I would like you to assign, if you would, assign me as the agent of record and our agency in town, Security State Insurance, and then we can continue to work on the policy for you.
We may have to do that at the next meeting. 'cause
Do
they're
you have a
doing-
template we can just go through the
I
meeting
do.
next time?
I do. I have a template here, and
Would that work for us if we did it in 2 weeks?
yep, it's not a big deal. It's just that they had asked me to do that because
Paul's not there.
Paul's not here anymore. So I have that, and I have this waiver for you.
Okay, so we'll get that included in the next meeting then.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody?
Thank you for all your,
Yeah, thank you for your time.
So good to have a little walk through the policy,
Yeah.
just to know what we're covered for and what we're not
Yep.
covered for, and to have everybody up to speed. So
And I really would like, to extend the invitation to working with us on maybe your loss prevention stuff and your safety training. They've got videos, they've got brochures, they've got anything and everything you could think of for that. So be happy to help you out there.
okay,
Right?
very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thanks.
All right, so we're gonna move right along on the agenda. So the next thing is we're gonna have a preliminary conversation right now about the North House Folk School lease. So we've had numerous conversations with North House. We have a conversation or two every year with the leadership of North House to talk about how things are going, because we do have a vested interest in them. The campus that they have, that's the blue and red building, and their commons area is city land. And the blacksmith shop now that they relocated the blacksmith shop. So we had a conversation last fall, summer fall, to discuss potentially changing the arrangement or modifying the lease arrangement, updating it so that the legal terminology is up to date, and then also readdressing the length of the lease as it is right now. So currently, North House is in a 25-year lease with the city, of which they have about 12 or 13 years left. That has a stipulation for an automatic extra 25 years being added to the end of that term if they meet a certain amount of criteria. And the criteria are written into our little letter here, and so that's where we stand right now. Now the continuing conversation with North House has been that their campus is continuing to expand. The organization itself is continuing to grow at exceptional rates. The impact of North House on the city has been tangible, and so the request came in last fall from North House leadership for the city council to consider readdressing the term of the lease. Extending it from a 25-year with a 25-year extension to just the full 50 years itself, or to extend it to a longer period of time, like a more symbolic period of time. I think that at that point the 55-year was thrown out, because then that would get North House to its 75th birthday or something like that. So this conversation is an opportunity for us to discuss what we feel about that, about such an arrangement, how we feel about the current arrangement, and how we'd like to see that proceed in the future. So,
Yeah, and
Unless you
what
think
you've got
that
in
that's
your
good.
packet is the letter that was from almost a year ago now, when this conversation actually started. And then 2 new pieces of information. This table that just kind of talks about some of the facts involved, and then the bottom of it is some concepts that they might ask you to consider. And then these pages that show the status of meeting the goals that were established as a part of the original 25-year lease. So maybe it's worth just starting with, does anybody have any questions about any of that?
Just for a point of clarification, they already have in this, the timeline sheet, once they meet the criteria, a renewing 25-year lease. That's
Yes.
currently.
Yeah.
So, the metrics look like they're well on their way to doing that. So we're looking at 36 years from now remaining. And they're looking for, right now, a 50-year lease starting now? Or would that be in replace, or when would the start time be on that?
The concepts that they've got listed anyway include recognizing how far along they are and just go ahead and make the renewal official now, rather
Okay.
than waiting 11 years, all the way to create a 99-year lease. And they had a couple of other
And it's
in
pretty,
between
you know, it's pretty clear that you know, the ask that they're making, you know, with throwing the 99-year lease in there, that is really the thing that they would love to have that be the reality. But I think that they throw that one in there just because then it puts everything else in a little bit different perspective. You know, if you look at the charts that they've given us about the different things that they have to do to get the lease goal, the endowment fund has already exceeded what they're supposed to have. So, well, that was you. I thought that was me.
Sorry.
And so, the other enrollment, student days, etc., are things that they are definitely well on their way for. And I just heard from one of the members of the office staff that said that this year their class enrollments are up 11% over last year, and that 60% of their classes are full with waiting lists. So those are, you know, those are pretty exceptional numbers for the school itself. And it, you know, looking at the amount of investment that they're putting into the campus there, I think that it's fair to say that they're making a commitment to remaining in that location. So then we look at the options that we have. We can do anything like this. I do think that there's a reason to look at the lease and to have it rewritten with some more updated language. I believe that the last time we talked about this, we asked Chris what he thought about the language of the lease, and I believe that the
He
beginning of
prepared
his
a draft with updated
yeah,
language.
the beginning
that
of
we
his
would
statement
use.
was something like and that usually means that there's some work to be done.
That's accurate.
Okay. So, so with that said, you know, if there's some work to be done on it, let's take a look at it and let's see what we need to do to make that, to make it serve the purpose of the lease. And while we're at that, do we acknowledge that North House has done, you know, that they've met the criteria that was laid out, or like the nature of the criteria, you know, the reason why we put those criteria, the city put those criteria on the school in the first place. Have they met that enough to warrant getting the extra 25 years, or do we want to start over and start a completely different arrangement with North House as they're jumping off into a different part of the development of the school? For North House, they have what they have to get out of this is that while they're investing, they're going to be investing several $1 million into their campus and expanding their campus. It looks much better for them to have a longer term arrangement with you know, the heart of their campus, the lease on the heart of their campus. So I think that's pretty much all of the stuff that I can bring up about the conversation of this. I don't know if anybody has any feelings about that or any thoughts, but now's the time to start talking about that. So,
There's two potential goals for this conversation tonight, just to kind of put some limits on what you really can do. One is to just discover if you're up in mind on this already, and don't overthink it if you all kind of have a path that you agree on. But two is to prepare a list. Northhouse would love to come back and continue this conversation with you, and if we could just kind of guide what you'd like them to show, if there's any information you want to see, or if there's anything you'd like to ask of them, that you could talk about that tonight.
I don't know that I have any more as far as numbers. I mean, their numbers are proving what they're doing. It's actually, when you really look at the numbers, it's startling. I'm, and I think I talked about this before, that's, for me, that proves a lot. Greg and I had a good conversation about numbers, and the concrete things that I like to look at and see. They are meeting their goals. I think it's going to take me a little bit of process and, hearing some of Chris's language to really look at this and a discussion between all of us as to how we feel, because oftentimes I feed off of other people's thoughts as well, when we talk about things. But there's no denying what their numbers are, and there's no denying what the folks who use North House bring to our community and what they spend in staying here, in probably groceries and eating out, buying something at a shop, whether it be a t-shirt that says Grand Marais, gas to fill their cars up. So, that's all a plus. I think often you hear from the public that doesn't get to see these numbers that they get city land and they don't have to do much. And I don't think that's true. I don't think people see the investment that they've really truly made there. And if people could look at these numbers and see just what they're doing, I think they would be as surprised as me and would be probably much more supportive than maybe some people currently are. So by us having a conversation, I feel like we're then validating what's happening and just where do we want to take it. 99 years seems like a really long time for me. I'm not trying to say that I don't think they're important or what they're doing, but it's like, I don't plan to be here in 99 years. I hope I'm not here in 99 years. But I definitely think we need to, as a group, look and talk with them about what are they really looking for, what seems to be a good fit for the city.
right.
The short-term stuff, though, every 5 years, that doesn't work. I get that. You have people that are contributing and boosting along your business. You need to have your investors feel comfortable. So I think it's just a discussion that we have to have with them and together as to what our vision is.
Well, and I think that what our vision is something that will help inform what their vision is. And because whether some people in the community want to admit it or not, like the community of Grand Marais and the North House Folk School are a thing. Like they are, like they are hand in hand now. And so the discussions that I've had with Greg is that a 36-year lease is awesome. A 50-year lease is better. And a 99-year lease is awesome. It's great. That's best case scenario. So I don't know if we need to think too much about what North House itself thinks about an arrangement with, like, what the arrangement turns out to be with the city. I think we need to look at what we feel the community's stomach for a lease arrangement with North House is. And I agree with you. 99 years is like that. That's well beyond the time that any of us are going to be making decisions for this community.
Yep.
And so I have a hard time throwing something down for that period of time because we're not going to be here to back up those decisions. So personally myself, and would love to hear from you guys as well. I agree with Kelly in looking at the numbers and saying, geez, I think that they've really fulfilled the intention of the safeguards that the city put on those leases, and I would have no problem going for a 36-year lease. But I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say as well, because like she also said, I change my mind a lot based on when people make good points. So
My thoughts are, with a continuing lease, we'll still want to have some sort of metrics, some criterias to meet, and I don't feel that we can necessarily follow these trends for 36 years
No.
unless we're going to have 20,000 people a year at North House.
right.
And so, one of them is like the actual number of students. I think that's becoming less reflective of the actual attendance there, because
Right.
people are just doing longer classes. And so, the endowments is really good to be looking at, as well as the student days in itself. And I might like to see some criteria for like public, whether it's free coursework that they can do,
Yeah.
something to kind of involve the whole community. And that's, rather than just like, let's look for this percent growth every year, maybe there's some creative metrics we can apply
And
that would
was
be good
actually-
for 30.
That was brought
years.
up at last year's conversation
Okay.
about this very topic, where we were talking about North House making an investment in the community for children's programming and for local programming.
We had the same conversation when Greg and I met. I
Yeah.
said one of the things that's very important to me is we're losing a lot of younger people every year out of our community for lots of reasons. Some of the things that I'd like to see is some of our community, and that being all of Cook County, investing in our youth. And how do you do that, or how do you see yourself doing that and playing a part in that? And we talked about they have programs for third, fourth, fifth graders. They have programs for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders. They have some other things, open opportunities that they advertise that they don't charge for people to come in. He met my expectations, not that they can't grow, but what they're doing now, and things I didn't wasn't aware of because it's not someplace that I've been
Right.
and have used. You live in the community, sometimes you miss out on all the really great things because you don't pay attention, but he really answered a lot of my questions as to kind of what are you giving back for the
Right.
people that are here, and I was very happy with that. But I think that's a good point, is what do we want to look at? How do you keep investing in those that are here?
Right.
Some of the timber framing, not every kid is going to be a college kid,
Right.
and that's okay. But they're teaching them a trade and something that they could do. That could you be a timber framer and live in this community? Yep, you probably can.
Yes.
So I was really pleased with that.
And there's also one of the stipulations that the city has for North House right now is the stewardship of the property. And that's something that I feel like we could expand on as well. What exactly is that definition of good stewardship of that property? So, you're going to say something?
Yeah, when we originally put these metrics in the lease, it had one mechanism, which was 25 years from now, if they've met them, it will renew. And we look at them every year, but they don't do anything. I mean, if we had a 50-year lease, what would you want those metrics to actually do?
Right.
And part of the thought process on that is, if we gave them some power, these metrics, like every once in a while we look at them and they can affect the lease, then we've completely removed the benefit of having the long-term lease in North House's perspective. And then the other side of it, I think the conversation about a longer-term lease is based on the fact that there's a trust level that they're a mature organization and they're doing the things that we want them to do. So we don't have to actually monitor it quite as much. It might be more useful to just formalize our relationship in the lease, and it is in there right now, where we send a city councilor to be a member of their board, basically, so that there's a conversation back and forth where we can continually share with them what the community's goals are that they can respond to, and then they come to the city council every year and just keep you up to date on what's going on. And that relationship is what then creates where we can affect their direction a little bit. Rather than if we create metrics like this,
Okay.
and honestly, when we did this 14 years ago, nobody knew what the heck should we even put in there. But when you do now, suddenly that's the direction that they go and they focus on.
And at present, I'm the city liaison to the North House board, and so I go to the board meetings, and when they have questions to ask, I answer them as to what the direction the city's going in. When the city has questions for North House, then I do I ask those, and they do their best to answer them, and then I bring those reports back to the council. That mechanism is already kind of in place, but I'm not a voting member of the board of North House. So I don't know, that could be something that we could see as being important, but then also we get back to the trust level, like, is it really going to help fulfill their mission to have a member of the city council be a voting member on their board?
Seems like a pretty easy ask though too, based on like, they probably sit on the most expensive piece of property. I mean, what else are we gonna do with that property? But,
Right.
I mean, that's the thing I look at. I mean, obviously that it's been successful. But, to me, I wonder, like, invest $2 million in capital improvements within 10 years. Like, what does that mean? Does that mean, like, building better buildings on our property that they're using? Or does that mean, and maybe it doesn't, right? But I guess I would just make sure, like, what are those specifics, right? Is it benches and lampposts and all these things for the Highway 61 redesign that is part of what they're giving back? Or different things, right? I mean, obviously there's all sorts of activity happening around. To help offset what is not being generated. And again, it wouldn't be generated anyways because it's city property, but it seems, I don't know. I go back and forth on, I'm not for a 99-year lease because whatever, that's just too far. It's too far out there. And even looking at, I think, smart that Chris has looked over and that we can correct the language or change the language to maybe be more appropriate based on what we know now. I think that's smart. And even 36 years from now, right? There's no term limits on city council. If I decide to stay here for 36 more years and I'm 76 years old, I remember doing that. I mean, that's still a long time. Nobody wants to have me here that long making decisions. So the fact that, I don't know, I like the idea of the 50-year just for the trust level of it, but I don't understand where a 36-year commitment to it isn't also committing to the idea and the support of, I guess.
And I think that it's, just to clarify as well, I do think that North House looks at a 36-year and a 50-year as accomplishing the same thing.
Yeah.
So
My question was, I guess I did have one, and maybe I've forgotten, we sidestepped. So the 3 performance criteria initiate auto renewal.
Yeah.
Are those criteria supposed to be when they accomplish them, it automatically initiates, or at the end of this 25-year lease?
Yeah,
because
at the end of.
So it just adds it on to the end of
So
the
if they
existing.
accomplish them and then things go south, they're not accomplished. So, but really, in my mind, that gets to where 36, 50, 99, what the heck is the difference?
Yeah.
As human beings, we can't plan that far ahead. There's just too
I don't
many
think that
variables.
I don't know why. I mean, I understand it in some ways, but in other ways, like, I don't know why you'd want to be almost, to me, like, and not that couldn't change, but I feel like there would have to be, even the fact that we're changing the language of how it's written after 20 years.
Yeah.
Because of the changes and the growth that's happened there, and probably beyond what they ever expected would happen, and certainly beyond whatever council was in place when it originally happened.
Well, most of those changes are just based on best practices.
But-
And so, would
but-
you want to do that? And there's no reason we couldn't add best practice language into the contract later with mutual agreement. So
But-
it's not like it never has to change.
Right, but I think like Jonathan's saying, like, you can't, it's not sustainable for Grand Marais to have that kind of growth
no,
for the next
No.
25 years.
Right. Which,
No,
no,
I
it's
I
not
mean,
going to happen.
so are you saying that's an argument for changing the criteria or changing the relationship itself, or?
I don't know. I
Wondering
mean, I
what
guess
your-
just like acknowledging that the longer term idea doesn't seem like as good of an idea, I guess.
The longer term.
The longer term, the longer term commitment to the lease doesn't, to me, I like the idea. I know they come every year and they talk to us about this, that, the other thing, but I think what Mike said about understanding what those metrics show and not just this continual growth, but what are those metrics actually providing for the city?
Well,
I like the opportunity to have other people. What if all of us in 4 years from now or 6 months from now are all different here? You know, I mean, that's the will of the town, right? In theory, not in theory, in practice, if that's what it is.
Actually is.
In actuality. And so, you know, that in some ways, even if it's not what we want, and we want like, yes, I mean, it is, I feel like there should be some time to be able to have a more, a review or maybe not a change of expectations, but an opportunity for how we change what their goal is.
well, in
for
putting
us.
these metrics in place, you're right. It isn't going to work going forward. I mean, if we gave that at 25 years, well, they've hit it, but in 25 years, what will the average be? If we expected 10% growth in 25 years and they say, hey, we've met it now, that's great, but now let's add on the remaining 14 years you have, or the remaining 11 years you have left. Now have we hit that 10% growth, or are we actually over the last 25 years at 3% growth? Because the numbers, I don't expect it to collapse, but it will not continue where it's at.
I guess what I was saying with having a creative metric system going forward is I wouldn't want it to be so set in stone that it could be restrictive, because in the next couple decades, you know, who knows how trends change, and maybe the new thing is 2-week-long courses. I mean, maybe that turns out to be incredibly
So the actual
popular.
student numbers would go
Right,
way
so
down,
those would
but
plummet.
student days would
Yeah,
stay the same.
and
days,
so
yep.
if we have to hold fast to any, especially, that student number. But then again, what if it changes and everyone wants to just come up for, you know, mini classes, but there's tons of them?
I honestly feel like the criteria, I mean, I wouldn't have any trouble removing the criteria and saying, hey, you've accomplished what we intended, so let's move on to a different set of criteria. Let's have a city councilor on your board, a voting member of your board, so they can have a say in the, you know, in the future mission of North House itself. You know, if everybody feels like that's what the direction we want to go, and then we're not going to be restricting the growth of their mission in any way, shape, or form, but we're actually going to be helping them direct that while fostering the relationship with the city. You know, I mean, like I think is kind of the final, like the end game that we need to be shooting for. So, and you know, Chris said he has some language, so maybe we have to take a look at that language, and you know, we as a council should take a look at what that, you know, that arrangement looks like. You know, it could be as simple as like, you want 36 years, then, you know, make the liaison a member of the board, and then we can, you know, then we feel like we have enough oversight and investment in that we're good. But you know, I don't know. I mean, like these are all ideas, and we can talk about ideas till we turn blue in the face. We just need to figure out. We don't need to make a decision tonight. You know, like Greg and some of the other leadership want to come and have this conversation again. So if we can all kind of isolate the things that we're in favor of, and the areas where we have differences of opinion, then I think that's where we need to end this conversation for tonight, so that we can start it up when they're here to answer some more questions. Does that sound about right?
Yeah,
I'm not sure I heard a lot of difference in opinion.
Yeah,
I don't think I heard a lot of difference of opinion either.
You know what, I don't know, in 50 years, are they gonna need our city property? I mean, they bought property next to ours. I don't know that George will have angry trout there 30 years from now, you know, or will it be there? Will somebody else buy it? Would they want that? Do they then need our chunk of property, where do they, things he can't answer, but we'll have to figure out what our comfort
Well, and that
level
would be
is.
that would be
Yeah.
their choice then at that point.
Absolutely.
You know, they would have that option.
Yeah.
So, does anybody else have anything else to say? I mean, do we want to dig a little deeper on this, or do we want to wait until we have the language from Chris and have Greg back here to talk about it? I feel like we're moving in a particular direction. It's just that we need.
Well, I think this is a good starter conversation, and we just continue to, it's not like we have to have a decision by the end of the month or the end of the year. We still,
We have 11 years.
yeah. Figuratively
It's only been a
speaking.
year so far.
When you put it
so
like that,
What's the
yeah.
hurry?
When you put it like that, yeah.
So,
Okay. Well, I mean,
but
is
there's
that
no denying what they've done.
Get the wording from Chris. and-
So, just, I'm trying to imagine how that's, I mean, you don't actually want to dig through Chris's language and have a conversation about the things that he's recommending in a council meeting, do you?
I
Does
don't know
that
that we
mean-
need to discuss it, but
You did?
it'd be good to read over.
Can he put together something that highlights some of it for us?
'cause some of
No,
the-
you can have it all. I mean, you can all read through it and understand it. I'm just thinking that, you know, we're going to take our attorney's advice on what the language ought to be. So we don't need to discuss a lot of it, is what I'm hoping.
We just have to, more of the substance,
Yeah.
or the meat of it.
Like what their actual
Right.
arrangement
Yeah,
is.
and his language is less about like our relationship with North House and more about just best practice lease language and
Right.
Yeah,
Legally.
you know, it's a lot of technical stuff. The lease is not in the worst shape I've ever seen, but it's not the greatest either, and it is deficient in, you know, there's a couple things, like one part of it calls for a license or use of the beach in certain areas, and it doesn't have any license terms or conditions that really define that. And then there's a right of first refusal for the sale of the property, which is referenced in the document with no specifics whatsoever. So I mean, it's those kinds of things that I'm addressing from a legal perspective,
Yeah.
not really a lot of policy stuff.
Yeah.
That's for us.
yeah.
So if we're gonna move on from this conversation, which I'm kind of getting the feeling that we're getting close to that point, then our homework is to be thinking about those policy implications. What are the things that we want to ask of North House? What are we willing to offer them in return to get a mutual agreement? And like really at this point, we write the lease, so we don't really need a mutual agreement, but. I feel
I
like
think we know what we're giving them.
Yeah. So we just need to make sure we feel okay with what we're getting back. So, cool? All right, so we're going to move right along to another subject. That one. Which is update on the golf course.
Yeah. So we, I won't go through the whole backstory of this, but we had a recruitment for a new superintendent, and after further time spent with the existing staff and review of our situation, at this point we're recommending operating with our existing staff and not filling the superintendent position this year. And instead, Marlo, who you all met at the meeting, has agreed to take over kind of a lead maintenance role. And what we would recommend doing is assigning him out of class pay to facilities manager, park facilities manager, with job description, which includes language about the golf course as well. And the intention is he would focus on the maintenance aspect of the golf course and not the clubhouse, and we would continue to operate the clubhouse with other park staff. He's agreed to do that. I think it is our best option right now for continuity of operation. He's a retired guy, so this isn't the long-term plan. And what we do at the time that we're buying ourselves now is recommit to a more thorough recruitment for the superintendent. The one that we had started, we were looking for someone that we could have work alongside our existing superintendent, so our search was not designed to go out and find that experienced person. And at this point, I think we need to do that, do a real search, certainly statewide, probably open up nationwide in some trade journals and see if there aren't some interested candidates that want to come and take a look at us.
What does that mean for us going into winter season as far as things that have to be done with seeding, with spraying, with, what does that mean? Because I know that, you know, Mike Kuncher even said they had a really tough winter up there.
Yeah.
Things are really hard, and I know things are starting to come back. I know a majority of the state, I have heard, has had a tough winter.
Particularly
And
northern Minnesota.
Yeah, we're not alone in that problem, but I want to make sure going forward that we're doing everything we can to make sure the course is ready. You know, you can't fight Mother Nature, but what are we going to do to ensure those things? Because now we don't have anybody on hand.
Well, we fight Mother Nature every year, so
Yeah.
we're going to give it a go. What we don't have for sure is somebody that's licensed as a pesticide applicator, and so that's something that we're going to continue as staff to figure out if we can bring that in on a temporary basis. Is there any local resources or regional resources we can use to bring that in? In the meantime, some of the other area golf course superintendents have offered help, not come to our course and do things help, but advice on the things that need to be done help. So in terms of like a maintenance program, we don't have that expertise right now. We won't until we bring in a superintendent, but we can borrow and rent it on a time basis. And we honestly, we just don't know yet how we're going to be able to do some of those things to put the course to bed. And we're going to have to keep working on that.
I would like to keep having updates on where we're at with that. I think especially with the number of people we had at the meeting that say, hey, this place means something to us, we want to have it here. I particularly would like to see it continue to stay there and remain. I think eventually that could maybe be turned around, that either it's break even or make some money. I think that somebody who's creative, somebody who understands marketing and some other things would open it up a little bit more. I think there's possibilities there. We need to find that creative person. And maybe it's two people. Maybe it's somebody else that can work in conjunction. I don't know. But I don't want us to box ourselves in. I think we need to be creative. And I just want to see that, so I'd like to keep hearing updates. Guys, I'm really sorry. 3 of my family members have tried. I'm a little nervous.
That's cool. We won't cover anything important while you're
Not
around.
Kool-Aid, nervous, but.
So that's the update, and we'll be happy to give you continuing updates as things develop.
I
But
think
right
that's
now, we at least feel confident that we can keep the course open. So that's our intention.
Any other questions? Okay. So we'll keep up with updates on how that is proceeding. A lot of this basically we're planning on going with the leadership, of the park department and the folks up at the golf course, the existing staff up at the golf course to make sure that we can continue to offer a high level of service, because they're the ones who know what that is. So that's where we're going on that. So moving right along, the 2019 budget. So Mike's going to have some stuff to say about the budget process itself, but I can run you through the library's budget here. There's a couple of important things to run through. Just for background information, if the library's budget is under 5%, a 5% increase, and we approve it, then the county board has to, is committed via the joint powers agreement to automatically approve it. So if you look at the different colors, the blue is all past years. 2017 that budget is in the light blue, and then all of 2018 is in the orange, light green, whatever you want to call it, is 2019. So starting off at the bottom, the 215 designated fund, all the purple that's across the bottom, this is the reserve fund for the library, or one of the reserve funds for the library. So if you notice in 2018, we spent $13,750 out of that reserve fund for projects and materials. And if you look at the 2019 budget request, we're not spending any of the money out of that reserve account. That's partially because the library is going to have some repair work that needs to be done, and is looking at doing some programming that would use that money as well. But there's all those programs and all that work will come out of the 215 itself. So things they're looking at, there's some foundation work and repair that they'll probably have to do with the building itself. They're currently seeking bids on that. There's also interest in putting a lactation space in there in the library for nursing mothers. And then there's also conversation about the need to add another office for the assistant director. Because right now the assistant director basically has a small cubicle in the back of the workroom. And so all of those projects would come out of the 215. So the next important thing is right above the purple, we're looking at the percent of increase. That's a 4.83% that's proposed, which is under the 5, which would signal an automatic approval from the county board. The increase for the city and county is then $8,447 over last year's, which means that both the county and the city, so we split it evenly, put $183,342 into the operating budget of the library for the year. And so that that $16,000 increase, or $16,894 increase for next year, largely comes in estimated health insurance and 3% COLA adjustments in the top 10 lines of the budget, which are all the personnel budgets, and then also some minor increases in expectations for like heating fuel and things like that, because those are things that it's always safe to be on top of it. And also there's looks like a $7,000 increase in books and periodicals, the actual purchase of stuff for the library, which last year was taken out of the designated funds.
Yeah, so it's not actually that much program increase in book purchases, it's just coming out of a different source.
Well, there's going to be additional programming, but that's going to be coming out of the 215. That's not even included in this budget.
Yeah. You can see the activity in that 215 was pretty heavy in these past few years, and that was actually a decision that the library board made when they decided that they needed to increase the size of their staff, that even though they received some significant increases in their funding, it was not enough to cover the operating, and so they had a 5-year plan to cover the difference with their capital funds. And this 2019 budget, now that's done. They're not doing that anymore. And so a lot of the changes from 18 to 19 are, you can just see everything that used to be down here in the bottom is now up in the top. And there's some offsetting revenues that they expect to cover some of that, and some of it's just part of the increase.
And I can say, so I'm on the finance committee for the library. I'm the board representative for the library, or the council representative for the library. I can say that when we sit down and we work through this budget, we really put it through its paces to see where the money is going, and to make sure that we've got this budget reflecting what the library needs. The decisions to increase staffing at the library came out of, kind of sheer exhaustion of the library staff that we currently have. And now we feel like we're at a place where the staffing there at the library is sustainable for now, like for what we're doing now. We are seeing a change in the types of assistance that users of the library are requesting of the staff. So it's becoming more technical, it's becoming more online assistance that's required, instead of just, hey, help me find this book. And so that'll probably result in an additional need for training for staff members. But right at this point, the number of clerks, the number of librarians, the number of support staff that we have seems to be sufficient, which was part of the library board's deal with the county and the city over the past couple of years.
So can I ask you one question then, Jay?
You can ask me as many as you want.
Just one. The revenue from fines and copies, year-end 2017 was, for all practical purposes, $13,000. 2019 is moving to $29,000. Why that big of a jump? It's over double.
The revenues include in 2019 donations that weren't included in that line item in previous years. So when the library received donations, they just put it in their capital fund, they didn't budget for them, but they receive them every year.
I'd like to see that as a separate line item, not
Okay.
in revenues. It should be separate.
Well, it can be different than fines and that kind of stuff you're talking about.
Yeah.
It's clearly a revenue.
Broken out,
library.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would like to see that because that's never a given.
Right.
You know, you can estimate what your typical fines are, copies, blah, 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 but when you're doing donations, that's kind of a different duck. So I would say that should just be a separate, still revenue, but separate line item.
I see the wisdom of that. Part of the reason why that was put into that line item was because we have a very strong record of getting roughly $15,000 in donations a year, both from library friends and from other groups. So
And it could
so
help
it should just
strengthen,
have
if
it be-
people see that,
see the line item.
literally, it can help strengthen it where people go, oh, you only got 5,000 or you only got 200 or well, we could
Let's
do,
give to the library.
let's do more. It can do that as well, but it's not one of those things that I don't like counted in as here, this is automatic. So that's why I like having it as a separate line item to say,
I thought you just doubled it because both my kids have library cards now,
Yeah, right?
and so it seems like our,
Well, and it's,
are you paying more fines? Is that what you're saying?
I think they work them off.
yeah, my boy works them off too. That tends to be.
You can't do dishes at the library. What do you do?
Well, he like puts the labels on the inside of the books and all those other
Got
sorts
it.
of things, and helps him clean stuff up. And man, he spends a lot of time at the library.
Cute.
So anyway, so this
Okay.
is the presented budget. If we feel good about this, if we feel like this is where it needs to be, then we have the option to approve that. We can also send it back to the library board to continue working on. If we approve this now, then this will go to the county board, at their leisure, because we're still very early in the budgeting process, to be approved, which, is part of the joint powers agreement.
I motion to approve the 2019 proposed library budget.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
No motion and a second. Any further discussion? I would just like to reassure everyone that the library board does really put a lot of time and a lot of thought into putting the budget together, line by line. So that's the only comment I have. Anything else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, carries. So, other things we have talking about budget is that it is that season.
Magical time of the
So we
year.
need to start looking at the budget calendar, and I will hand it over to Mike because he walks through this stuff so much more efficiently than I do.
This budget calendar is not particularly different than what we did last year, for those of you that were around, but for those that are new, we provide our department heads with some worksheets. We've already done that with Steve in the library, because there's certain parts of their budgets that are fairly fixed. We always start out with the assumption that the staffing level is not going to change unless some board has made a conscious decision about changing it. So we provide them with what the personnel expenses are going to look like based on their previous staffing levels. And then they'll go through, and if they think other things need to be adjusted, we'll do that. They'll send those worksheets back to us. We'll consolidate it into one big picture that we'll look at as kind of a preliminary first draft budget with the council. When we get that preliminary first draft budget, then we'll schedule meetings. So now we're down to August 13th to 29th, if you're following along at home, where the department heads will actually come and sit in front of the council, and you'll have a chance to talk to them about the worksheets that they've completed, their draft budgets. If you have any questions, if you have anything you'd like to see different, if you want to just say, hey, thanks, Rick, you're doing a great job, whichever you like, that's the time we've got for that. At the end of August, then, if there are any changes came out of those conversations, we'll incorporate it into more of a final draft. Then, beginning of September, you can see the September 12th is your first September meeting, and that's when you'll set a date for the Truth and Taxation hearing, which is going to be already set at December 12th. But also, that's the meeting where you have to set a preliminary budget and levy. The preliminary levy is a number that you can't exceed, but you could come down from. So it's still, normally it's a conservative number, and sometimes we've left it as is, and sometimes we've come down from it. But you've got a lot of time between September and the rest of the year where we can continue some more difficult conversations. We can dig in depth on some issues that may have come up in August. We can make adjustments as needed. And then in December, you'll be asked to adopt the final levy. That's pretty much it. Some of the things that we may spend some more time on after September 12th are looking in more depth at our, say, 5-year capital improvement plan, for instance, where we've got some pretty significant projects still on that list, and we just want to make sure we understand how they might affect the 2019 budget, but also the 2020 and 2021 and so on budgets as we're setting this out there. So that's our calendar. No numbers for you to look at. One opportunity, though, and I think we've gotten a lot of feedback from you about what you'd like to see, but if you want to just add any very specific feedback that we can give to the department heads when they're preparing their budgets, here's your chance to do so.
I'd like, within reason, I would like to see department heads come back and think about the ideal staffing for their departments. So if they have 2 FTEs and they really think they could use 3.5, that they talk about that, show the costs, and tell us, the reasons. I don't want to say I want to give them a wide open availability to do it, but I would like to hear from them what they're thinking, why they want to do it, and then what would the numbers be.
Okay.
That includes obviously health insurance, benefits, stuff like
Right.
that. But I would be curious to hear from people what they think.
So staffing level and service level obviously go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
And normally a department head is going to respond to a question like that based on a service level assumption that the council would provide them. We can still ask this question, and I think it might be interesting for you to hear, like, if they feel like there's a disconnect between what they think the service level ought to be and what they're currently capable of doing. So that's the kind of answers I think you're going to get with a question like that. That
Well,
might be real interesting to hear.
Yeah, I just would like to hear it.
I mean, right, but if I'm understanding that right, I mean, if we're also, they're going to come with what their proposed budget would be, like, so for the revenue producing entities like the liquor store and the rec park, then those, I mean, if they're projecting, increases over this year, like are those, does it reach a point where if you have that growth, and maybe those, maybe it's just an additional, like, part-time hires, but
Yeah.
would there be a better fit if you could now, like, because that growth has continued, would it make sense to maybe bring on an addition? Is that kind of what you're saying? Like,
Well, in some departments, and I don't, like the street, public works, they aren't necessarily a revenue type department.
right.
But
Yeah.
they may come back and say, listen, we're hearing from City Hall or here, we have to do all these different things.
Sure.
And with the manpower we have, or woman power, person power, we're not able to accomplish it. So I would like people to come back. I've dealt with it before where people say, here's really what I want to do and here's why. And a lot of times department heads feel like, well, everybody tells me when I ask, I just can't. I want them to feel like they can come to us and say, here's really what I'm looking for and why. Because as people in the community start saying, well, how come you're not doing this? Why isn't this done? You've got ordinances, you're not following them. Okay, let's take a look at what stepping up some of these services that are non-revenue
Right.
would do for us.
Right.
And then you put it out there and it gives the people at Truth and Taxation a time to come in and say, I'm not willing to pay for that, or yes, I am. Look at what the county board has been experiencing for the last 2 years. And be careful what you wish for, but I do want to hear from more people. It doesn't mean they're going to get what they want, doesn't mean I'm going to agree with them, but I want to really hear what people have to say.
Yeah.
And so I would like the department heads to come and say, here's what I'm thinking, here's why. To kind of give that open end.
It being open-ended, you're really going to probably limit the type of useful information to address a specific issue. So I would say to augment that, you may also as a group want to ask for a specific thing. Like, if we decide to do this, department heads, tell us what that would take. I think you'll get better information with a question like that. And then just I also want to add, particularly with all of our part-time staff in any of our departments, but particularly at the liquor store or at the rec park, we don't give them a fixed full-time equivalent number to work with. They have a staffing level, like we want to have this many people on these types of, but it's part-timers, and so we strive to give them regular schedules, but they have other things going on too. We'll go up and down in the number of actual employee part-timers that we'll have in any of those staffs, and we don't normally have that conversation at a high policy level. They have the freedom to operate as needed. And this is a budget, right? It's just a tool. It's a planning tool. It's not something that we tell them that is a limit. It is a guidance, and over the course of the year, we're going to make changes to it as things come up or changes need to be made. So, to ask, let's just use Chris for an example. We've had conversations about he has himself as full-time, and then we have one senior liquor store clerk that's full-time and everybody else is part-time. And at what point does it make sense to, or does it make sense at all to add another full-time person in there? So that you can hear that conversation from him and what he's thinking about that and what it might add and what it might cost and is it worth it? So that could be a real interesting thing you might hear from people.
I'm okay with that because we have those meetings that we can meet with them and we still have time to go back and drill down. I don't have anything set in my mind to say if we did this project or we were going to follow this ordinance, what would you have to do? Because there's a lot of ordinances out there, but they probably get more feedback from the public than we do sometimes, being the people in the field. I want to hear what they have to say. If they say, well, one person told me with this, or if they're saying, I must have 20 people a week tell me, okay, it's something I want to know about.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Cool. Any other comments on or thoughts on the budget process, budget calendar?
Looking forward to it.
Every year.
Good for now.
All right. So we're going to move on to, unless you guys have something to add to the agenda, no. Moving on to council reports. Mr. Moody, you're up.
The only thing I have, which I think everybody else got too, is that they're doing the groundbreaking on the Lutzen project, housing project for the EDA on the 31st, which is, I believe, a week from yesterday, so next Tuesday. And which is exciting that that's moving forward. And yeah, I haven't had any other meetings. So.
There you go. Mr. Stuckelberg.
We met up on July 12th with the DNR down at the rec park to go over the water access project. Generally, it's following the proposed master plan print that's out there. The main takeaway is that it's looking like construction would begin the spring of 2020. The 50% design plan is slated to be done this year, and then moving into 2019, the start of that we get like a 90% plan done, and then there's a lot of final, that last 10%, acquiring all the materials, and there's a potential for a lot of coordination with that construction project with the 61 project, and but it's looking like 2020, and there will be more news coming on the rest of the year as far as once my plans start coming in and developing.
So we got $2 million from the state on that, right?
And we asked for 2.3.
2.3. So has it been determined yet at all what
Well, the original project,
300,000, what happens?
the original project wasn't fully quoted out. It was
Two stages.
Yep, they thought that's kind of what it looks like, and Jay's right. It was a two-stage project where the breakwater portion would be one stage, and the parking area and that would be another stage. They're looking now at just having it be a one-stage project, and potentially the winter or the late fall of 2019, bringing in some of the concrete, heavy materials that would interfere with spring road restrictions, so they could have those there in the winter, and then, so that's just a lot of timeline stuff.
I was pretty impressed with some of the creative thinking that they were doing as far as mobilizing some of the materials, because those materials, we wouldn't be able to move the boulders, for the additional break wall. We wouldn't be able to get them up here until the, June or July, depending on when road restrictions come off. And so they were saying, well, let's do it during the winter when everything's frozen. Because those things aren't going to be, they aren't going to be, subject to cold or heat
No.
or anything like that. So I was pretty impressed with their thinking on that, and I'm feeling pretty hopeful about it. They also mentioned that some of, if there's overages over the 2 million, that this gives them additional year to put into their budget money to kind of buffer the project for 2019 and then 2020. So they could actually, offset some of the planning funds and things like that in their 2019 budget, which would then make the overall cost of the project lower.
Do we have any thought in there, or public restrooms are not included in that, right? This is the area.
There was discussion of there is either a porta potty, or there was talk of a cement tank,
Vault
a
toilet.
vault toilet.
It's a pretty short walk to bathhouse 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was-
There's
There's provisions for, and I think we're thinking just porta potties.
Yeah, because they were
Last
talking about the cost of the vault toilet compared to the level of service that they provide is, a lot of times people actually, they'd rather use a porta potty than they'd rather use a vault toilet, because the vault toilets can get really stinky and stuff. Anyway, they had lots to say about that. So
Yeah.
we can, entertain more of that conversation when we get 50%.
Oh, yeah,
there.
just didn't know if
Yeah,
it
because
was
that's when
in there.
the design's going to start getting flushed out, and we'll have some money values behind it.
Oh, so exciting.
Anything else?
That's it.
Ms. Winger?
YMCA board meeting, July 16th. We talked about, they're in discussions with the school again. They have a contract with the school for areas and some of the things the school's responsible for or has a say in. Imagine this, where it's tight on space. So there was some discussion with us and the school as to how we share this space and how we serve all of the needs of the people that are using the buildings. Both Emily Marshall and Bill DeWitt are going to continue trying to talk and solve some of those issues. That was a tough thing to figure out. And they are having their public party up at Skyport Sunday, August 19th. It's kind of a celebration to say, look what we're doing. And they invite the public and the board members, just kind of a get-together for a couple hours for beverages, and they have appetizers and things out, so that will be on the agenda for August.
Sounds like a hard agenda.
Should
Anything
have
else?
meetings like that.
Yeah, we should have meetings like that. Could we have drinks and appetizers?
Well, it's not a formal meeting, it's a get-together.
Just put it in
No
the
business will be conducted.
Budget talks.
Yeah, wonder how that would go, huh?
Yeah. That's it?
That's it.
Okay, so yesterday Mike and I attended the ICS, the Incident Command Center, or Incident, Command System.
We passed the test yesterday.
We passed
Just
the
don't
test
ask
for-
us any questions.
We passed the test for ICS 200, which is what we, technically, for the city, the city council is we are a part of that whole incident command system as the policy, policy leaders. So in the case that there would be any kind of an emergency, we might have to convene an emergency meeting so that we could change some policies allowing some of the use of our resources for an emergency and or authorizing use of city funds to respond to an emergency. That's really the only thing that we as a council need to worry about as far as emergency response is concerned. But we learned all the details of that and what unity of command and unified command mean and all kinds of things that you're welcome, you don't need to learn. So
Did you get one of those lights to put up on the top of your car?
just the
For
one.
like if you have to run down here
Yeah, that'd be great.
Or his bike.
On my bike. Yeah, I'll put it on my bike.
on your Buick?
They don't even have civil defense helmets anymore.
That's a bummer.
Really.
Library board was on Monday night, and that was where we talked largely about this. The library is seeing some changes in its usership, going more towards the type of interactions. Some of the programs and events that the library has had have been incredibly well attended, and we're going to be doing, trying to do more of those sorts of things. And the library did this Spark It trailer, like this trailer that they brought to 5 or 7 different locations throughout the county to gather information from people, and they've already been having people reach out to the library to utilize the space and the resource of the library because of that. So there's probably going to be a Spanish language group that's going to start meeting at the library at some point, and we're looking for other ways to increase the outreach to either 2 diverse communities in the county, or how to expose people in the community to more diverse groups that we don't really get much opportunity to get exposed to. So that was that meeting. I was at the meeting with the Marais Water Access. After that, DNR had an open house to talk about the Grand Marais to Cutface Creek section of the Yichigami State Trail. Some people have feelings about location of one of the bridges over the Fall River. That really doesn't, that's outside our jurisdiction, really. So, there you go. The downtown business group met. Mike was here, and asked them what they thought about the location of the City Hall and the liquor store. I also attended, and he can tell you what they said. I also attended the Jamada meeting on Tuesday, Jamada meeting for Tuesday morning, and asked them what they thought about it, and they passed a resolution or letter of support for having City Hall and the liquor store moved up to the town of Otisek. So they, as they were talking through it all, they saw that the benefits of moving everything up there would be greater than keeping it down here. So
Did they say what those benefits were?
the conversations
Wow.
it's one of those things where as soon as they start talking, it's going to get louder. There it is again. Downshift. Some of the conversations that they had were like, well, up there we have the space to have all the city stuff on one property. Then that makes this property more attractive to developers. You can solve the issues that the liquor store has as far as parking and loading zone and space and storage space and blah blah blah, all those sorts of things. And plus, they thought that it would be really good to revitalize the area up on top of the hill a little bit. So that's part of the conversation that they had. Let's see. Where else are we at here? Just a few more. Maybe I missed one. I know there was more. Stormwater meeting, downtown business meeting. I think that might be all. So, what did you have about? What did they say?
What did they say? Well, they didn't pass any resolutions, the downtown business group. They certainly don't want to see us move if it means this isn't a vital site anymore. Like, that's more important. I just encourage them to reach out to you directly with feedback, and if they want to do that as a group, great. If they do that individually, great. They had a conversation about it. I think very much like the city council's conversation, they need to see more information before they can really say which is a better way to go. It's like the ideas need to be developed further. So, but it was good. They appreciated the opportunity to be involved in the conversation, and so I'm glad that we got to do that, and we're going to keep working on finding other existing meetings to go and co-opt and have our agenda get helped a little bit. So that was good. So the other thing I wanted to just report on is 2 weeks ago we said that the Tom Taboda building was going to be gone by now, and you probably noticed it's not gone. And instead, it's just spread out a little bit. Vite came up and did a quick scouting before they mobilized their equipment and thought that they saw something that was likely to be asbestos containing inside one of the foundations, the open foundations of one of the buildings. That stuff was not sampled previously. So we had it sampled, and it is indeed asbestos containing. And so now tomorrow we will be having our remediation contractor come up. The plan is he thinks he'll be done or either before Monday or on Monday. So Vite's still planning on mobilizing on Monday, and they think they'll be done next week. So I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces in there still.
Anybody know where the sign came from that says free? That like showed up out of nowhere.
I have no idea.
That might have been one of the signs when that place first went out of business. He was given, just trying to get rid
No,
of
this has shown up in the last couple weeks. It's a metal triangular stand, and there's a big free on the
I thought
front.
maybe even this
out.
week, but
Out by, sometime last week, I think I noticed it out by the road. I don't know if it's meant to be a joke because of all the metal that is sitting out there and all the mattresses that are sitting out there in the front. But going into where, well, it's July. It looks
yeah,
terrible.
it'll be moved, and we're moving all that stuff ourselves. So hopefully before Vite even gets here. Just everybody's busy in July.
Mhm.
We're using safety precautions because that stuff is like,
Yeah,
Disgusting.
well, I
yeah.
have a feeling there's probably issues with things that have sat around that long.
There
Yeah.
certainly are, yeah, that we know about, and they are taking precautions, yes.
Anything else?
Nope.
Kim?
Nope.
Patrick? Okay, before we go though, I have one last thing that I have a note sitting on my computer about. I had a resident come up to me today and say that they're noticing vandalism out at Artist Point on the rocks, spray
seen that too.
painting and such, and is wondering what the channels are to get that taken care of. Like to have that cleaned off the rocks, or well, how do we deal with that? Because that's technically Forest Service space, isn't it?
Yeah, more, it's actually
Yeah.
service space, yeah.
So is that something that we report to the Forest Service and have them clean up, or is that something that
Well, I don't think it would hurt to report to them.
we can do that?
I wonder if it's in conjunction, there's spray painting apparently on one of the, somebody mentioned, on one of the billboard signs as you're coming into town, just as you crest the hill and come down like from Wonder Barn area. Forgot to look up today, I'm usually watching.
I think that's been painted over, but I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
Yeah, the graffiti on the rocks, there's five or so spots. But I noticed those months ago. Just a few small spots, and I guess maybe it's spreading. They're painting like the wood walkways and so. Some bad words, and then one said "Go explore," which I thought was a weird motivational graffiti.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Wow.
quite sure what to make of it.
I've seen a number of pieces of graffiti up here that I always kind of just cock my head to, and just be like, man, we live in an odd place. If somebody would spray paint, kind of these mysterious, not like out of line, but just kind of mysterious
Mm.
sayings on things. Anyway,
Doesn't necessarily mean it's people living here either.
no, it's definitely doesn't have to be. So, well, I'll follow up with the Forest Service on that and see if there's any role that we can play on it. Because this resident, what his plan was to just take another can of spray paint out and just to spray paint over it. And I was like, I don't know if that really makes any difference. Like, that's not really the right way to respond to
No,
something.
that's not.
So,
Spirit's right.
yeah. Anyway, anything else? And break. We are adjourned.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Night,
Thanks,
Chris.
Carol.